Joining me live is the Assistant Treasurer, Stephen Jones. Congratulations on your appointment and welcome to AIM Agenda, Stephen. First of all, do you share that optimism with Jim Chalmers about where we're at and where we're headed?
Look, fundamentally, we've got a very resilient economy, but the short term, we've got some significant challenges driven mostly by external events. We've got supply side shortages emanating out of China, mostly, but not just there, which is affecting everything from construction to the supply of medical products. We've got inflation, which is the net result of these supply side shortages. The Reserve Bank having to respond to that, and a whole bunch of the problems that we inherited which constrain our ability to deal with it. So $1 trillion worth of debt, $84 billion in the last government budget deficit. But we think we've got the plans to turn these things around. We're being open and honest with the Australian people that we're not going to be able to deliver a turnaround within the next month or two to some of these fundamentals. But with the right plans in terms of skills, in terms of our productivity agenda, getting wages moving again, we think we've got the answers to the big challenges.
I think you'd agree that the skills challenge is not quite short term, it's more medium term, if you agree with me on that front. You have inherited a jobs market and a labour market where business at the moment in Australia, they just cannot fill 400,000 job vacancies across all sectors. Isn't it the short-term solution that we boost migration quickly and significantly?
Oh, look, a bit of column A and a bit of column B, Laura. We obviously will be looking at migration, particularly skilled migration. We have a preference towards permanent migration so that people come to Australia, have a stake in the future of our country. But we'll take a pragmatic approach to that as well. And we've got to be training our own. We've got to be giving kids who are in Year 10 and Year 11 and 12 at school today a hope that whether they decide to go a professional pathway or a vocational education pathway, that they've got TAFE, they've got universities and employers that'll greet them with open arms. So we need to do both. We can't be lazy about this and just be pulling in skilled workers from overseas while ignoring our own young people coming through and people who want to retrain.
Okay.
But we also know we can't wait 4 years to fill the skills shortages that we have today. So there's going to have to be a bit of both.
I know there's a bit of ideology in this, and I don't say that as a criticism, to be fair, but I mean, look at aged care. We've been talking about the crisis there for months now, indeed years if you look at the Royal Commission. I mean, what do you do there? These aged care centres cannot wait for people to be trained.
Yeah, before the pandemic, the aged care sector was incredibly reliant on workers coming from the Asia-Pacific region to work in our aged care sector. And again, that's another area where we know that we're going to have some reliance on overseas workers, but also looking at how we can retrain and divert workers from other sectors into the aged care sector. A fair bit of that has gone on. But one thing we know for sure, if a worker has got a choice between earning $20 to $25 an hour working in retail and earning $20 to $21 an hour working in aged care, they're going to go to the higher paying job, particularly if the conditions are better. So unless we are working on the wages and the conditions in the aged care sector, we don't have a sustainable solution. It's why Anthony Albanese has written to the Fair Work Commission backing a move in the minimum wage, and also why Labor in opposition said in government will support the Fair Work Commission and fund the Fair Work Commission's decision to boost wages in the aged care sector.
Stephen, even with the 5.1% increase in the minimum wage, that would not keep up with inflation, as predicted by the RBA. Your own Treasurer said it'll probably be even higher than that for some time. What can you say to people to reassure them that you're not going to get into this wage price spiral?
Yeah, look, I think the first thing we can say to them is we've got to have a plan which is bringing those inflationary pressures down. And for the most part, the inflationary pressures in the economy at the moment aren't being driven by wages. Wages have been suppressed by over a decade now and have gone backwards for the most part. So wages at the moment is not the big cause of inflation within the economy. It's got much more to do with supply shortages.
But if they go up,
which are being imported from overseas.
If they go up by 5%,
yeah, look, I don't think it's too much. Yeah, I don't think it's too much to say to Australian workers who've seen their wages go backwards over the last decade that as a bare minimum, we don't want to see you go backwards. I don't think that's too much to ask when the wages share of national income has gone backwards over the last decade. I don't think it's too much for workers, if they're in the enterprise bargaining sector, to be saying as a bare minimum we want to keep pace with cost of living increases. And for those lower paid workers on the minimum wage who are not in a position to bargain for a bigger pay rise directly with their employers, that they keep pace with cost of living increases as well. Now, as we are dealing with these challenges, we've got to have our values to the forefront, and our values tell us that the people who are struggling and who are doing it toughest shouldn't be left behind in any recovery strategy.
Are you going to bring forward the start date for your new childcare scheme?
Look, all of our budgeting and all of our budgetary estimates in opposition were premised on a July 2023 start date. So I'm not aware of any plans that we have at the moment to bring that forward. We will do exactly what we promised to the Australian people. If further discussions that are go on in that area, whether it's bring forward of initiatives or whether it's other support, that'll have to be those decisions that'll be have to be taken inside the budget envelope that we have received. And you know, we're very mindful that government through its action shouldn't be stoking the inflationary flames. So we're not going to hide from the fact that we've got a really difficult situation. It is our responsibility to deal with. We're not ducking responsibility, but we've also got to be very frank with the Australian people that we can't stoke the fires of inflation. And we've got to manage a budget that was already popping at the seams through the actions of the previous government.
Well, the biggest spending government in history, now the opposition, is talking about unnecessary government spending that could push inflation higher, and they're talking about your off-budget spending. A lot of this is for upgrading transmission lines. What do you think about that?
Oh, look, a moment of contrition on behalf of Angus Taylor, who's probably, as a government minister, had more to do with the current energy crisis that we're experiencing at the moment than any other person in Parliament. Maybe throw Barnaby Joyce in there as well, but a moment of contrition wouldn't go astray for Angus and his colleagues. We know that if we don't deal with the rewiring the nation, fixing our transmission system, then we won't have a way of connecting all the renewable energy that we've got to bring into the market over the next decade to the places where it's going to be used, because our existing poles and wires system is designed around connecting the existing coal-fired power stations and existing generation network to the places where it's being used. If you've got a much more distributed system, and if we're going to get that energy generation into regional Queensland, central Queensland, regional New South Wales where we need it, where the sun is shining, where the wind is blowing, where we've got great geothermal and tidal and hydro energy potential, then we've got to rebuild our transmission system, and that includes Snowy 2.0, by the way. So it's actually not an optional extra, it's something that we have to do if we're going to be able to connect energy generation to the places where we need to use it.
Well, in your mind, and from your point of view, is nuclear absolutely off the table? Is it reasonable to entertain this suggestion from the Nationals that we should at least look into it?
You know, if you lived in a country like Finland or Sweden or even the United Kingdom and parts of Germany, nuclear does make sense because they don't have an abundant supply of fossil fuels, they don't have an abundant supply of renewable energy, so it does make sense in those countries. But in a country like Australia, where we are literally the source of both renewable and non-renewable energy sources, it simply does not make sense for us to be investing today in something that won't generate 1 new watt of electricity for 10 years. And as much as it runs on uranium as a power source, it is also running on government subsidies, because there is no way that we can have a nuclear generation in energy in this country that cannot operate without generous government subsidies for decades to come. So we think you can have a distractive conversation about it if you like, and I understand and the opposition is trying to change the conversation away from what they have done with energy over the last decade to what they might do in the future. But we've got to put in place solutions for the next decade, not solutions for things that might come online 20 and 30 years down the track. And I guess the question for David Littleproud and the Nationals and all the rest of it is this: if it was such a good idea, why didn't you do it 10 years ago, or 9 years ago, or 8 years ago, or any of the years that you're in government? And the answer is because it's not viable and it doesn't make sense for Australia.
Well, that wasn't their answer, but I did ask that. Just before I let you go, Stephen, you said this week that it's a priority of yours to regulate the buy now, pay later space in companies under the Credit Act. Why is that necessary?
Look, it's a great product, or it's not one product. There's lots of products operating. The big brand names like Afterpay and Zip are well known to consumers, but there is lots of others operating in the buy now, pay later market as well. Most of them are operating outside the regulation of the National Consumer Credit arrangements. We believe that there should be a level playing field across credit providers. We think it's a new and emerging and often innovative product, but we want to ensure that it's safe for consumers. And as households are coming under greater pressure, we want to ensure that these products are safe, and they're operating under some bare minimum standards so that when they're offering a credit product, and frankly, we think it is a credit product, we want to ensure that it's offered to people in a way that they know it's affordable and appropriate to the consumer's needs. They're bare minimum standards that need to be put in place. We'll work with industry and consumer groups. We'll adopt the code that's been developed by the industry. We'll legislate for that and fill in the gaps. It's not it's not a shock to the industry. I've been open and frank with them for about 2 years now, that if we win government, and we have, that we'll move in this direction and we'll do it in consultation with them. Good for the industry, but also good for consumers. Stephen
Jones, you've got plenty to do. Thanks for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you, Laura.